And I think one of the things we can say is the human has the capacity to imagine and to create. That's a fantastic capacity. We also have the capacity for the infinite. We can stretch toward the stars. And today we're beginning to realize that technology is shaping that capacity in new ways. Technology is no longer just something that is helping us, it is in a sense defining us. The term cyborg was a term that emerged when we began to develop space travel. A term to describe, well, what happens if we strap an oxygen tank to a human person to enable them to sustain breathing in space. So he called that a cyborg is a short for a cybernetic organism. It means a human who is aided by certain electronic devices, so biology and machine. The cyborg has become the symbol of the human in our own time. Here's the thing about the cyborg. It disrupts all dualisms. Body and soul, matter and spirit, male and female. The cyborg body is unbounded by the skin. It's all those pathways by which information can travel. Now, I know this is, oh my God, are you kidding? But what Christians claim is a hybridization, so to speak, of divinity and humanity. In a sense that this kind of blending of divinity and humanity is, in a sense, what the fullness of Christ will be, neither male nor female, slave or free. So, in a sense, Christianity is a cyborgian religion in the broadest sense possible. The cyborg does signal the end of the autonomous self, the self that's bounded, that's constrained by gender or ethnicity. And the cyborg speaks to us of a more protean self, a self that's permeable, that can blend, in a sense, with other things. So here's what cyborgs tell us. What counts as human is not and should not be self-evident. Because our own inventions are telling us something about being human that we had never conceived before. And there, the post-human is not the absence of the human, it's actually a new conception of the human, now as cyborg, or in a sense, wedded with technology. So what we're saying here in post-humanity is that the imaginaries of the human have shifted.
So my buddy from the Nearer Prefect channel pointed me to this video of this woman named Ilia Delio. She's this Catholic transhumanist, and she has a doctorate in something, I don't know, but she's a total evolutionist, transhumanist, mystic, New Ager, essentially, in the whole vein of, emergent church type fashion. But this is a fascinating talk, as you heard at the beginning there. Those are clips from it where she's talking about the cyborg and the cyborg Christianity being a cyborgian religion. And at one point she even says that Jesus was a cyborg because he was a combination of human and the divine. So it's pretty over the top. I mean, this in itself doesn't necessarily probably need a lot of exposition in terms of just how far gone she is with. I mean, all you have to do is look at the books that she's written about consciousness and evolution and environmentalism and transhumanism and all the. I mean, she's a full-on devotee of Teilhard de Chardin, and that's the part I was going to play. Because while this might be sort of self-evident in terms of like how deceived she is on every level, and how even things like cosmology and evolution factor into the things she's talking about, there was that bit I put at the beginning about how even the term cyborg came out of the development of space travel and strapping on oxygen tanks onto a person, and how that creates this enhanced human, this concept of a human who's sort of has a symbiotic relationship with technology. So anyways, this part where she gets into Teilhard de Chardin is, I think, a really good bit that distills so much of the source of so much of this teaching and how it all can and is being encouched in religious terms, even though by no stretch of the imagination is she an Orthodox Christian in any way. The gospel is completely absent. I mean, even for a Catholic, she's pretty extreme and heretical in so much of what she's saying. But the reason that I think it's worth listening to and then trying to kind of absorb is because even while this might be this very extremist, evolutionist, overtly New Age embodiment of these arguments and these teachings, I think the real crucial questions have to do with how are these blatant forms of quote-unquote Christian transhumanism nevertheless seeping into not just the Catholic realm, but the Protestant/evangelical world and the mainstream church and their attitudes towards technology and how they're going to grapple with all these questions, things like AI and the singularity and all these things that are becoming talked about more and more. And I think that's what I've been focusing on this week, is just that whole question of how are Christians being, even right now, conditioned and gently nudged towards accepting these ideas that come straight out of guys like Chardin and, the occult, basically. So let's listen to that, and then we'll explore that some more.
But here's what I want to say, paraphrasing one of the ancient Greek philosophers. The unreflected cyber life may not be worth living. And so I do think it is important to bring technology and transhumanism into a wider context, a wider conversation. For one thing, technology is not opposed to religion, nor is religion opposed to technology. In fact, if we go back to St. Thomas Aquinas, Thomas would say God makes things to make themselves. So self-making is already written into the very heart of nature. That nature, all you have to do is look at nature to realize it is creative. It is transcendent. It is protean. Nature does new things. That's how we got here after 13.8 billion years. So we can say, oh my gosh, really? Oh, nature, creativity in nature. It's like, oh yeah, hello. And the person, I think, who kind of got his head around the big picture was a Jesuit scientist by the name of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Teilhard wrote a lot on trying to bridge science and religion, evolution and Christianity. He lived at the dawn of the computer, and he was absolutely fascinated by it. And what he said is that evolution, biological evolution, is almost getting maxed out. We have, in a sense, now occupied all the geographical space sort of around the globe. Biological species are not diversifying at the rate that they did. He says now evolution will be determined not by survival of the fittest, but by our own capacity to converge and unify. The next level of evolution is unification for Teilhard. Now, interestingly, Teilhard was a friend of Julian Huxley, the brother of Aldous Huxley. And it's Julian Huxley who coined the term transhumanism in 1957. And, basically what he thought then is that the human species, he says, can transcend itself, not just sporadically, an individual here or one way there. He says, we need a name for a new transcendence of the whole species. And he calls this transhumanism. In his words, man remaining man, but transcending himself by realizing new possibilities of and for his human nature. Teilhard picks up on Huxley's idea of transhumanism, and he puts it into a much larger framework. And here I think we need to do the same. We kind of get sidetracked with the technology, and I love it, But we sort of get almost frightened by it sometimes, like, oh my God, I'm gonna, be brain downloaded, and I'm cyborgian, and what am I gonna be tomorrow when I marry a robot? But Teilhard is like, let's step back. Let's just take a little moment here and step back at the whole sweep of evolution. So he looks over the sweep and he says, look, it's cosmogenesis. There's a birthing of cosmos that gives rise to a birthing of biological life, biogenesis. And now he says with the computer, we are on a new level of genesis that he calls noogenesis, or mind, or the birthing of mind. And therefore, he sees that this new age of technology is not a break with evolution. It is now continuing the trend of evolution in a new way. Teilhard saw he had a basic law for evolution. As he looked over it, he said, look, the whole thing seems to be an upsweep of diversification. We get different species. But also, there seems to be a law of complexity. Things keep drawing together and complexifying into more degrees of relatedness. And he says, with that, we have a rise of consciousness. So he speaks of the law of complexity consciousness. Now, one thing that I think Teilhard helps us is, he says, it's not just, evolution is not random. I mean, there probably is an element of randomness in evolution. But the fact that we are here even to talk about it is telling us of something more deep at the heart of evolution. And Teilhard then looked at the prime stuff of life. Now, we still use the language of being, but that language of being needs to be, in a sense, qualified in what is the stuff of life today. And what Teilhard said, the stuff of life is energy. And he looks at, you might say, an energy in the universe that is attractive energy. There is a basic law of attraction, he says, by which things keep being drawn together. And given a sufficient amount of time, as they're drawn together, consciousness rises. So he sees this energy in terms of love. He calls it love energy, a center-to-center energy. And therefore, things come together and then they go beyond themselves. Well, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that love shifts our consciousness, right? Now, if I look around the room, I'm going to assume that everyone has fallen in love at least once. And when you are attracted to another, when we are drawn to another, our consciousness changes. And that's all that Teilhard is saying about cosmic life itself. And so he speaks of love as a cosmological force. And we're so used to, in our culture, speaking of love as an emotion, a sentiment. We fall in love, we fall out of love, and we tend to reduce the emotions to something secondary to thinking. We think, oh, and by the way, we love. But what Teilhard says is, no, love is deeply written in the heart of nature. And when that love, in a sense, is thwarted, whenever it's distorted, we will seek new means, whether consciously or unconsciously, to restore that love to a life-giving direction. And that, I think, is at the heart of AI technology. And so, therefore, the rise of a new level of consciousness today through technology is, in a sense, an invitation to a new level of love in the cosmos. Now, Teilhard did posit, as a Christian, that God is not out there just kind of waiting to see how we'll do with our technologies. God, he says, is the Omega. God is that wholeness of love, that absolute center of love, who is already in this Big Bang universe from the beginning. So he speaks about God Omega from the beginning, empowering this evolution towards more love and more consciousness. And therefore, he sees this noosphere that emerges with the computer as part of this upsweep of love and consciousness with God Omega at the center. So the noosphere he speaks of as global mind. And this is where we are today. We are on the level of the noosphere. We can turn on our computers, our cell phones, and we know what's going on at any moment in the world. This is unprecedented in the history of the human species. We have a connectivity with others that we have never had before. We can reach out and touch someone electronically in a way we've never had before. So what Teilhard says is we are moving from self-reflection to co-reflection. And he says we must think of interthinking humanity as a new type of organism. We are, in a sense, a new species in and through our technologies. And we can realize new possibilities for evolving life on this earth. What Teilhard thought is that technology must help move forward our spiritual energy. It must increase our consciousness and maximize our relationships. And here is where we're sort of in and out of things, because we're not conscious of how we're using sometimes this technology. Interestingly, Teilhard thought in the end, and he was a scientist, he said science will have to face its own limits. He did not think that science could actually lead us to the ultimate wholeness of life. He felt that however far science pushes its discovery, and however capable it is of remodeling us, it will always find itself in the end facing the same problem: how to give each and every element its final value. So what does Teilhard do? He invents another word. Not transhumanism, he says, but ultrahumanism. And I think Chautauqua is about ultrahumanism. And ultrahumanism means not the anticipation of the perfection of being. I'm going to become super intelligent, super powerful, and I'll never die. And I think, oh God, how boring. I really don't want to hang out here forever and ever. But, but it's rather more being. It's ultrahumanism is the progression toward more being. And Teilhard writes, he says, it is not well-being, but a hunger for more being, which alone can preserve this thinking earth from the tedium of life. And isn't that what we long for? Not so much, we can be physically well, but if there's not something deeper within us that is being fulfilled and addressed, we are left, in a sense, flipping through our emails, looking for something. We're never satisfied. And so Teilhard says ultrahumanism is the next level of evolution through expansion of community through greater unity. He sees in this regard technology and religion working together. In fact, in a sense, and this is where we are today, we know technology is, in a sense, leading to a convergence of religions. By convergence, I don't mean a vanilla blending. We're all thrown into the same pot, but a sharing of our spiritual energies across boundaries, and that is enhancing us in some ways. So he sees that we can be moving toward a new organic flow. But what Teilhard envisions is, with technology, a new unity in love. A new unity in love through what he calls a collective of minds and hearts. That's our challenge. We're still, is this all about me, and my Facebook friends, or am I using this technology to be part of a larger whole? So that's why I think Teilhard's vision of the noosphere in this evolutionary sweep with technology does impel us to ask, does technology make us more selfish or selfless? Is it all about me in my iPhone, or is there a we phone we need to come up with?
So I know that was kind of long, and there was a lot in there, but the overall talk was like over an hour. So I kind of thought that chunk kind of really boiled down a lot of what she was getting at. And she starts off by, just asserting that technology is not opposed to God, and God is not opposed to technology. And then gets into, all the stuff that Teilhard de Chardin was talking about in the mid-20th century, and indeed, we've talked about him before. But the interesting thing to me is that And again, this definitely does tie into cosmology in the sense that so much of those cosmological debates kind of center around this question of, are people who are still embracing various elements of the mainstream scientific establishment, even while they deny the 14 billion year universe or whatever, and deny the Big Bang and deny evolution on paper, are they not still perhaps absorbing a lot of the ethos of that evolutionary mindset, even while they're arguing against atheism and materialism and everything? And that's a subtle and tricky thing to nail down, because if a person is doing that, they're definitely not thinking they're doing that. So it's a very subtle dimension of deception and double-mindedness, while you're simultaneously trying to affirm various beliefs and claims that are ultimately contradictory and antithetical to one another, but being oblivious to that disconnect. And I really do think that the whole topic of transhumanism and technology and AI and all these things are very parallel in a lot of ways. And the fact that she talks about all those things sort of in relation to transhumanism and everything is really interesting. Because I can definitely hear how, while so many, even Christian truthers, but especially the mainstream church, the asleep church, quote unquote, while there are certain things that she says that they would probably outright reject and think was way over the top and just a bunch of humanistic garbage, if you just isolate various things that she's saying that are coming from, this Chardin noosphere concept, the we, the idea of love, and that's really what we should be trying to embody and embrace, and all about coming together. And even while somebody is rejecting the theory of evolution in all the theoretical senses, nonetheless, you can actually see how there's still so many people who are still embracing those sort of overarching ideas of there's still a progression of knowledge and technology that is divinely sanctioned, and that these tools of technology can be used for good or bad, but they're not evil in themselves. And so, obviously we want to use them to help people and to be connected and to love and share the gospel and do all those things. An interesting thing that kind of surprised me when I was listening to the entire talk was that she spends a good portion at the beginning actually talking about so many of the ways that technology, specifically just even with cell phones, like how much that has just changed human culture already, and in so many negative ways, and hampered our ability to have face-to-face relationships, and how addicted we are to just waking up and the first thing you do is check your phone, and the way we gradually learn to interact and relate to each other, because we can just unfriend somebody, or thumbs up or thumbs down, and all the social engineering aspects of it. She doesn't call it that, but acknowledging all these very sort of depressing, rather dystopian realities that are present in the world even right now, with people just becoming consumed by technology in ways that makes them self-absorbed and self-centered and superficial and all those things. So, of course, when you start with the premise that, well, technology is not opposed to God and God is not opposed to technology, and that technology in itself is not good or bad, but you also don't acknowledge that, yeah, it's man that has the problem. It's man that is sinful. And like I said, when you throw out the gospel and you embrace this sort of universalist concept of Christianity basically being this Gnostic concept of transcendence, yeah, it's completely antithetical to the Bible and completely Luciferian, really. But how many self-professed Christians out there today would still resonate with ideas of this call to, embrace community versus isolation, to embrace, collectiveness and cooperation versus division? And so again, it's sort of this dialectic kind of thing where, by acknowledging all these negative things that are sort of being manifested symptomatically through the way we interact with each other through technology, there's this stubborn refusal to admit that, like, the technology is never going to enable humanity to come together in this cooperative, loving energy kind of way, this energy concept of God, this evolving God. Because they've taken out the cross, they've taken out the atonement, taken out the resurrection of Christ was all about being the first Adam of the new man, the resurrected humanity, that has nothing to do with technology. And that's the thing, is that in contrast to a lot of the other proponents of transhumanism, like Kurzweil, where the emphasis is so much on the body and the immortality and, becoming gods and all that, she talks about that quite a bit, but she's sort of downplays it and then is trying to focus more on, the spiritual, the meaning, the purpose, relationships, community, that it's not just about becoming cyborgs in the physical sense, in the most literal sense, even though that's obviously a big part of what she's talking about, but it's more like a concept, that the cyborg is really, as she's saying, the whole emphasis of Chardin is the we, is the whole, is the group transcendence versus the individual transcendence. And so that's where so many people, because obviously we all instinctively dislike selfishness and self-absorption and narcissism and isolation and all those things, we all have a natural knee-jerk reaction against those things, especially as time goes on. And, we see whole generations now being raised where cell phones and Wi-Fi and technology are just all they've ever known, and seeing how these younger generations are just so shaped by it in ways that we're only beginning to even really appreciate the negative ramifications. But in that reactionary response to all that, you can see how this whole concept of, it's the inevitability of it, right? Because she talks about how we're already becoming cyborgs with our pacemakers and our eyeglasses and, hip replacements and things like that. And people go, oh yeah, well, that's true. And I mean, we're all sitting here communicating via the internet and using technology and using our phones. And we all know that that's just what you have to do to kind of operate in the world today. So all Christians who are now living in a society where technology is just a normal part of our everyday lives, it's almost impossible to imagine how that situation just doesn't lead to a search for some kind of way to harmonize these things and to find some sort of redeemed use of technology, some sort of redeemed attitude towards technology and the progression of technology, because technology is never stagnant or static. The nature of technology, especially computer technology and digital technology, is constant progression, and it's steaming faster and faster straight ahead towards the whole singularity concept. How fast can we make computers? How connected can we be? How do we get more integrated? That is part and parcel to using technology, is constantly upgrading, constantly getting a better phone, constantly having to learn about new apps and new companies and new ways that technology is being used. Otherwise, you might as well not use it at all. It's very hard to use it and not find yourself on that escalator, whether you want to be or not. And maybe that's the part that I think, even personally, I wrestle with more than anything, because it is such a pervasive yet subtle conditioning that I even feel in myself every time I log into anything or pick up my phone or use technology at all. Obviously, there is so much good that can come through it, and the gospel can be shared and truth can be spread. And yet it's crazy how when you hear her talk about the noosphere and the coming together as like the global mind, this global community, this interconnected humanity, and every time you try and do anything for any altruistic, well-intentioned purpose by using this internet technology, you're still contributing to that overarching mindset of, coming together and the global mind and the noosphere. You're still affirming it as much as you're trying to expose it. And that's the whole paradox of it, right? It just feels increasingly paradoxical, like a little bit more every day. And eventually it gets to the point where I don't know if I could just instantly agree with the claim that God is not opposed to technology and technology is not opposed to God. I mean, an idol is an idol. There are some things in the world, when we look at conventional idols, statues that were made out of wood and stone and metal, when you get to that point where you've taken your tools and built something like that, there's no way to say that that creation is not 100% opposed to God and everything that God stands for. So maybe that's the tricky thing, because we have all these tools that we can use for all these things, these digital information tools and data sharing tools, right? If that's how we want to think of technology. But what are we building with it? And this is why you really can't talk about spiritual questions or biblical issues without coming back to eschatology sooner or later, because you have to have a concept of where it's all going and why God is allowing things to progress to such a zenith of human knowledge and technological capability and interconnected cooperation and all these things. At some point you have to be able to stop and say, this is all about building an idol out of ourselves, out of our cooperation. It's not so much the object, it's the idea. It's the community. It's love. The idea that love itself, whether you want to talk about it as like energy or just, consciousness or whatever, making an idol out of love, and not just, romantic love or sexuality, like that's been idolized for forever. But this, the new age concept of love that, if put in the right terms, and especially if it's put into Christian sounding terminology, who out there is oh, I'm against love. Nobody's going to come out and say that they think we should, be more hateful to each other and less loving. It's kind of like the ultimate, of course Satan's going to try and commandeer just the very concept of love and pervert it and twist it and turn it into something that sounds so good and sounds so appealing and sounds so genuine and authentic, but it's not the biblical definition of love. It's not the real understanding of love if you don't address the issue of sin. And that's what all these different, there's Protestant Christian transhumanists and other guys out there. I'll leave a link to the video below that Nero prefected on the destruction of the temple and the false prophets at that time, and then he makes this amazing comparison to today with the new temple being created that is this, this singularity gospel promising to basically put the Antichrist spirit in the temple that is ourselves, our bodies, and a blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. He did an amazing job, once again. And so, hopefully you hear what I'm kind of ruminating on with all this, because yes, it's real easy to point to somebody who's like, yeah, she's a Catholic, Jesuit quoting, transhumanist, evolutionist, heretic in so many ways, and it's easy to call those people out, but really the subtle deceptions is how these attitudes and these mindsets and these sort of isolated arguments are already seeping out into the broader, religious marketplace, so to speak. And churches increasingly, and pastors and pulpits are, especially as they're trying to, reach the younger generation and stay relevant and keep their doors open, they are being increasingly pulled into those conversations and having to address the questions of faith and technology. And I think we can already see, the last church I tried to go to, the last brick and mortar 501c3 church I tried to go to a few years ago, they had these kiosks in the lobby where you'd literally go in there in the front of the church, and there'd be people lined up waiting to log into this little kiosk machine, log in, so it logs all your attendance, your giving, your hours you volunteered where, and everything. So everything is tracked. And they've got like multiple, it wasn't even a huge church, it was 1,000 people or something, but they invested in these kiosk machines and this whole software that runs it, and everyone has an app on their phone, and you can stay connected, and the cyber church inside the brick and mortar church, and it was like nobody's even fazed by it. Nobody's even like just disturbed by that whatsoever. And it just creeped me out so bad, but it was like just kind of hard to even process that people were just without even a thought as to like all the reasons why that would not be a good idea, or where it's going. And so yeah, I wish I had more clear-cut answers in terms of like, where are the lines, where are the boundaries to not get slowly swept away with the tide. this technological tide of being part of the Wii phone instead of the iPhone. Using technology for, basically the social gospel is what it is. The techno-social gospel. And while Christians may never adopt terms like transcendence and the singularity and transhumanism, there's already some that are, and outwardly advocating transhumanism, but I think most of the transhumanists or the ultrahumanists, quote unquote, are ones that don't even necessarily use that terminology. But nevertheless, they are embracing these just generic ideas and being carried ever so gradually, or even not gradually anymore, but just step by step, inch by inch, towards new norms all the time. Norms which are just baby stepping the entire world towards the mark of the beast system. Not just in the sense of, we're going to get you to the point where you'd be willing to inject a chip into your body, or some kind of implant, or some kind of DNA upgrade, or whatever, physical, technological step the mark might actually turn out to be. I think I'm less inclined to even focus on that more and more, but it's really about the ideology behind it. I feel, the actual taking of the mark, by the time it gets to that point, people will have already been so saturated with these occult concepts, that were laid down by Chardin and all these people decades before. Without even knowing about those people, they'll already be embracing, this whole ultra-humanist noosphere ideology. And you can modify it for whatever, evangelical intentions you think you have, or spreading the flat earth truth, or, whatever else. But like the frog in the pot, slowly brought to a boil. You do it gradually enough, the frog doesn't know he's being cooked to death. It's really a more sobering thing to ponder than sort of really any massive cataclysmic or crisis event, or whatever false flag attack they might try and pull off, or economic collapse, or any of that. To me, this actually gives me more chills than any other scenario, whether it's a war, the grid goes down, or and really, I think this keeps me up at night more than all those other things put together, because it's so subtle, because it sounds so good in so many ways. And it can be rationalized as being compatible with the gospel, when in fact it's really not. So, thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of that. God bless.